Paul Thigpen wrote a story called Seeing Christ Incognito. When we serve those he loves, we discover the joy of serving Jesus himself. Paul writes, when I was a child, the story of Jesus' birth sometimes left me a bit sad. I was glad to know the Lord was born, but the circumstances of his coming seemed cruel. I fretted about the noise and dirt and cold of the stable, and the rejection Mary and Joseph must have felt in being turned away from so many places. I wished I could have been there to help in some way. With typical childish confidence, I thought, even someone my age could have given up his own bedroom for the night, or brought some blankets, or kept the animals quiet. Only years later did I realize that if I'd been there, I might well have been as selfish and unconcerned as everyone else in Bethlehem that night. But at the same time, I grew to recognize that ever since that first nativity, the needs of Christ continue. Even today, I have a chance to ease his suffering. Perhaps I saw that reality most clearly one Christmas Eve a few years ago. Our home was buzzing with anticipation. It was the first Christmas for our first baby, and her proud grandmother had come from far away to help celebrate. My brother, his wife, and their daughter were driving in from out of state as well, bringing with them an older single man who would have been alone otherwise. The house was bursting with delicious aromas, colorful lights, and nostalgic music. It was one of the most exciting Christmas Eves I'd ever known. As we were setting the table for the feast, the phone rang. It was the young mother of a refugee family from Vietnam, whom we and another family had adopted. For several months, we'd been spending most of our free time with them and other refugee families we'd met through them. We collected food, clothing, and furniture for them, took them shopping, job hunting, and for medical care, and taught them English as a second language in a weekly class we began in their home. Given the circumstances, a call from this young woman was nearly a daily occurrence, so I wasn't surprised. Since they were a Buddhist family, this day was like any other for them. I knew they were unaware we were celebrating. With the guest due to arrive at any time, I thought I'd wait a minute to be polite and then offer to call back later. My heart sank, however, when I heard her say the phrases she'd had to learn almost as soon as they came to our city. Baby sick, go doctor. Her little daughter, only a year old, had been plagued with recurring ear infections and sore throats for months. We had taken her to the doctor many times before. I wish I could say at that moment I was glad to have another chance to help these friends in need. But that wasn't the case. I answered, I'll be there soon, but only with half a heart. Then I told my wife gloomily, if I'm not back in time, go ahead without me. It's Christmas Eve, Lord, I grumbled. Our guests will be here soon. Why tonight? The doctor's office was closed, so that meant finding a hospital emergency room or a 24-hour clinic and scraping up the cash to pay for it. I grumbled all the way out the door. In the car on the way to their home, however, I came face to face with my own selfishness. My eyes began to burn. I was angry at myself for having such a shallow love. It wasn't the first time our commitment to these new friends had been tested by inconvenience, but somehow the contrast of my frustration next to the joy of the season brought into sharp clarity the limits of my caring. I was ashamed and I prayed for forgiveness. As it turned out, we found a clinic rather easily, and the child only had a minor throat infection. After a stop at the drugstore to fill the prescription, I took them home, explained the prescribed dosage, and hurried home myself. There I discovered that my brother's family was running several hours late and hadn't arrived yet. I felt even worse for having worried. The evening, when it finally got going, was warm and happy, one I'll long remember. But longer still, I'll remember the grateful look on the mother's face and the peaceful look of the child as she fell asleep in relief. And I could never forget what the Lord seemed to say to me that night as I was dropping off to sleep. words I had to write down. Son, you've often thought what joy it would be to see me in the flesh and care for my physical needs. You've wished you could have lived when I walked the earth so you could walk with me. Tonight, you had your wish fulfilled. I walked the earth again in that frightened mother. I cried out again in the flesh of that suffering child. Tonight, your town was a Bethlehem. Their home was a stable. And when I had nowhere else to lay my head, your arms were my manger. I was sick and a stranger, and you took care of me. Though you acted only with half a heart, with the eyes of your whole heart, you can see me now. It was waiting for you to find me in the least of these. Don't ever forget what you saw tonight, for wherever you go, Bethlehem is all around you. That night, Paul writes, I knew, just as the scripture says, I had seen the Lord and the needs of the people I had served. And because of such a vision, that Christmas turned out to be the most joyful ever.